Yo, what up? I'm Josh. Today, we're going to be reviewing a live stream together. Joe from Helena First Assembly in Montana reached out on Instagram a couple weeks ago asking if I would take a look at their live stream. He said he's been in his role of technical director there for about 8 years and really just wants to be a good steward of what God has given them, but sometimes feels like their live stream isn't 100% where they want it to be. So first off, of course I'm willing to review the live stream, and I'm willing to review yours too. That's the whole point of this channel, to help people get better at live streaming on a budget. So if I can help out with that, more than happy. If you want me to look at yours and give you some pointers, fill out the form in the description below and I'll try to get to it as soon as I can. Before we take a look at Joe's live stream and give him some pointers, let's get a rundown of what gear they're using there. So camera 1 is a Blackmagic Ursa Mini with a Canon 70-200. It's on a tripod and it uses iCan focus and zoom control. Then they've got camera 2, which is a Blackmagic Pocket 6K, again with that Canon 70-200 and the same iCan gear on a tripod. Camera 3 is another Pocket 6K, this time with a Canon 25-120, and it's unmanned, and I think this one is actually up by their drum kit. Then they've got a spare Pocket 6K that they sometimes use for a rover, but not every week. For switching, they're using a Blackmagic Production Studio 4K, and their audio is run into Pro Tools via Dante, and they're using Luke Hendrickson's worship template in order to mix. Their live stream is being sent out via Resi. So that sounds like a solid loadout. Let's take a look at how their live stream actually looks and sounds. All right, so let's fast forward through this little intro here and let's get going. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so right off the bat, the volume of their stream varies greatly from the intro music to the actual worship, so they could pull that together. And the camera movement looks a little shaky there. The cuts don't feel super intentional. I will say their mix feels pretty good. I think it's a little quieter than where I would want it to be, but overall it sounds like a good spot to be in. Again, they're using that Luke Hendrickson template, which is a pretty good starting place for most churches, but you need to make sure you dial it into exactly what you need. Okay, now see that right there. That right there. So you notice how when they first cut to the camera, everything was stationary, and then about a second later, the camera started panning to the side. So one, not super fond of panning. I feel like it's just an excuse to not have a clear subject of your camera. But two, starting the motion after you're live can have a really weird feeling to it. It doesn't feel seamless. So you want to make sure if you're going to be having your cameras move, you want to make sure that movement is already going by the time you go live and it continues moving until the time you're cut away from. So let's go back to this. Okay, so this shot right here, you can kind of see there's not a clear subject of this shot. We've got the keys over here and a lot of the vocalists here, but we have a lot of empty space going on right here. I would love it if this shot was focused up more on an individual thing rather than being quite so wide. Another thing I would mention too that we've seen throughout this stream so far is it feels like the cutting is not super deliberate. Rather than cutting with the music of the song, it seems like they're just cutting at random points. If you cut with the rhythm of the song, things will feel a lot more natural and our brains start to expect those cuts to the point where they kind of blend into the background rather than surprising us when they happen. That surprise can kind of pull us out of the worship experience and it's just not great for somebody at home. All right, that was okay. Adjusting the camera as we're live. So something else that would be great to see on this drum cam, you know, all of the other cameras are moving a little bit, but the drum cam is completely stationary. And I get it, if you don't have enough people to man all these cameras, then it can sometimes feel good just to put one on sticks and leave it there. But adding some handheld motion to the camera that's on the drums will add a lot of energy and really make that kind of punch through, especially in those big instrumental parts. So again, here we see this camera being a little shaky and there's no clear subject for what we're looking at. This is not something that's great. I like the positioning of this camera. I think it's in a good spot on the stage to be able to shoot across that front row of vocalists and also get shots of the keys and I imagine a guitar player over there. But they need to make sure that the shots they're getting are very intentional. So something else I'd really like to see here is some more close-ups of the vocalists and even the instrumentalists. There's a lot of wide shots and the wide shots look pretty good, but it would be nice to be able to get in close with whoever's leading the song and really show their emotion and the energy that they're bringing. That helps people really relate to what's happening on stage and feel like they're getting up there on the stage with them. Sometimes in a broadcast, we want to show people an angle that they can't actually experience in real life, so getting right up close next to the action even if that's a guitar player playing or it's just somebody singing. It can really help with the level of immersion and just help people to worship in a different way. Now, I like this shot here. I really like that shot of the keys. Something that I would like to see again is some movement, like across around the hands on the keyboard. They might not have a lot of room to do that, and that's fine. But that shot was framed pretty well, and it was a pretty good shot. Now again, I don't love these shots that zoom in and out like this, and there it stopped, which is just a little bit jarring as a viewer. Something else I'll mention here is it definitely looks like they're going more for a cinematic style broadcast, just based on the cameras they have and the way their stage looks, etc. But if you notice, they're not really using the thirds a whole lot. This guy right here is clearly the subject of this frame, but he's pretty centered up in this frame. If you were to move him over to this right third, it would probably cut her out, but it would probably make the frame feel a little bit better overall. Now this shot here, I like that they're getting shots of the guitarist over here, but I would like it to be a little bit tighter and be able to see that energy a little bit more. Okay, so something we just saw was a little bit of movement on this camera, but the shot right before it is completely still. If you're going to have some cameras have some motion, and I suggest that you do, again, for that more cinematic style, even if they're on tripods, it can be great to add some motion. But jumping between a camera that has a little bit of motion, like the more floating feeling, or even a handheld camera, to one that's completely still and stationary can feel very jarring to whoever's watching. So I would recommend that if you're going to have motion on your cameras, make sure it's pretty consistent across all of them. Otherwise, somebody really might just get pulled out of the moment as they go from a moving shot to a more still shot. This shot right here is just obviously not exposed correctly, so I would just make sure that whoever's operating that roving camera on stage is just keeping up with exposure levels and adjusting them as needed on the fly. Yeah, I just see a lot, it seems like your camera operators are not quite prepared for you to switch to them, and I would just work on that. Something else with this shot, actually, is there's a lot of headspace above the vocalists here. And especially if you're going to be doing this panning shot, there's no real reason to have it pulled out quite this wide and have this much headspace. Headspace is a hard thing to teach people because it's all a little bit subjective, but as a general rule, you want to keep a few fingers width between the top of the head and the top of the frame. It's something that people just kind of have to learn and feel, but it'll make a big difference. All right, let's skip ahead a little bit more. Again, I love this wide shot. I think it's framed nicely and it looks great, but I would love to follow it up with a close-up of this vocalist. This is a great shot here. Oh, and there's that close-up of the vocalist. I would just make sure, as that vocalist is kind of moving back and forth, that you're kind of moving with her. It can help feel like you're really in the moment versus just watching something. So something else that I don't love personally are these black bars at the top and bottom. I think it can sometimes make it hard on your camera ops to actually frame the shot because they don't know exactly what's in frame and what's out of frame. So I would review whether or not you actually need that and what benefit it's bringing. I know that it's keeping your lyrics kind of out of the way here, but I would argue that it actually cuts more out of the frame by having these here, and again, makes it harder on your camera ops, so I would consider taking those out. Alright, now let's go take a look at the actual sermon, or people speaking. Okay, this looks pretty good.
Those at the table thought it was a waste. I'm sure they were thinking, oh, there's an old English word that says worthship. It's where we get the word worship. Experienced firsthand the grace and love of Jesus, and it wrecked her.
Yeah, I like the different camera angles you have here during the sermon. I think most of them feel pretty good. Again, I would try to make sure that they're framed correctly using the thirds and making sure your headroom feels pretty consistent across the shots. And also making sure that as your subject is moving, that the cameras are moving with them. I think it just makes a huge difference to how things look and feel. So something that I think is a little bit confusing and maybe jarring to somebody watching, but maybe not, is that you have these lower thirds with the Bible verses, which I think is great. But then during worship, you actually have your lyrics up at the top of the frame To me, that's a little bit confusing. You've got things in different parts of the frame depending on what's happening at church. I would rather see a more consistent usage of the lower third, keeping your lyrics down there to match what's going on with the verses, but that's just a personal preference. All right, so we just finished watching the stream. I hope I wasn't too hard on you, just trying to get a lot of information captured in a small amount of time. Overall, seriously, it's a great live stream. Your audio sounds solid, your video is pretty well exposed most of the time. It's just some small tweaks to your framing and to the way you actually handle the cameras. I know it can be hard to train volunteers to do some of those things the right way too, but just work on it. I think it'll definitely elevate y'all to the next level and really just make your live stream that much more enjoyable to watch. Overall, though, it sounds like you guys are doing great there as a church and reaching a lot of people for Christ, which at the end of the day is what this is all about. So seriously, kudos on that. I can't wait to see what types of changes y'all implement and where you go from there. Because again, you've got a solid foundation to build off of, and it's just making little tweaks here and there to really elevate this to the next level. Just a reminder, if you want me to review your live stream, fill out the form below with your information and I'll reach out to you with any next steps. I want this to be a place where we can all learn from each other and really just create better experiences for our worshipers at home. Until next time.